Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 25, Master Gunnery Sergeant Rich Deuto, Outbound Operations Chief of 3MEF Information Group, Inbound Senior Enlisted Leader of Marine Cryptologic Support Battalion, a.k.a. the Historian. His arrival in Okinawa 2 years ago was my opportunity to have a 2691 Master Guns on the island with me that I could engage with regularly for much the same kind of professional discussions you hear on this podcast. I held off as long as I could to record this episode because I wanted to have as much time before the interview with him. Personally, the interviews which focus on a guest with whom I have a strong personal relationship are the most rewarding. I'm sure you agree the exchange was value added to the show. Admin note, the Top Game t-shirt campaign is still open for 2 more days. You can score yours at bonfire.com/top-game-podcast. As mentioned before, all proceeds go to offset production costs. It's a simple text-based design that highlights a central theme on these interviews. You tell me who you walk with, I'll tell you who you are. Disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed on Top Game are those of the producers or the guests appearing on the program and do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in. Do you want any coffee or anything like that before we get too far into this?
I'm good.
Sure?
Yeah, I went to the gym this morning, so.
What'd you do?
Chest, bis, tris, and abs.
You still break it down by body parts or?
So I can't do as many body parts as I used to. Okay. So like squats and anything with legs and hips, that's a null and void. Except for like elliptical or bike or getting on the road every now and then.
All right. Well, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that it was you kind of had those same jitters as you get right before a PFT.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
All right.
Why?
It's like right before you take a PFT, you know you're going to do good. You know what your abilities are, but there's that you don't want to embarrass yourself, and people are looking at you, and it's kind of the same as this. Once this is recorded, once this is out there, it's going to be out there, right? So if I don't do 20 pull-ups, then it's
so there's some truth to that. Yeah. But I would say that there's a lot of good in it.
There is. Keeps you humble.
Well, yeah. I've also gotten back from a lot of our listeners about the fact that it's good for them to hear specifically with regard to certain individuals that they've had experiences with in the past, mm-hmm. that there is a healthy amount of self-doubt resident in pretty much all of us. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's readily apparent on at first glance, it's there nonetheless. And I think that the junior membership of our community need to see and hear and be exposed to that. Recently, I've been getting a significant amount of feedback because I just dropped several episodes back to back to back. So it's created some churn. We've hit that 10,000 download mark, and since I hit that 10,000 download mark, I've already had another 500 just like out of nowhere.
It's good. It's good.
But one of the key asks from the audience, the ones that have been engaging with me, is kind of digging into some of the things that I have already, but maybe in a little more detail. But I also have the mindset to ensure that I'm doing my due diligence in terms of tailoring the interview to the individual mm-hmm. to a certain extent, because we're not all built alike, right? Each of us brings something unique, just as we're unique individuals to the organization. And one of the areas in which you've kind of not necessarily vectored off, but really kind of honed in on is your love of the history of our organization and what that means to us, what that means to you. I mean, when I walk into your office, it feels like I'm in a small static display for a museum or something like that. Like what initiated that, and what has kind of perpetuated that through the years?
I guess it goes back, when I was a kid. My dad's a retired master guns, and I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. So things like the Beirut bombing and Grenada and those things in the 80s that happened in the Marine Corps, that's not a history thing to me. That's friends' fathers that were involved with that growing up. When you're a kid, you play war. Dad would bring stuff home for me, and I was that guy that had all the gear that Dad would bring home, and I just kept it over the years, and I thought it was fascinating. And then it's like, hey, if I have a pack, why don't I get an e-tool? Because if I get an e-tool, how about a cartridge belt? What's this Y harness thing? What's the Y? And it just kind of grew from there. And then you watch movies and you hear the sea stories, and you're like, My dad always said he wanted an M1 because that's the rifle he had when he was in boot camp. And then you get an M1 and you're like, I want a bayonet. How about a sling? How about a cleaning kit? You know what? And then it just eventually morphed into Jeeps and radios and other weapons in different eras. And you just, I was just fascinated with it. And then taking that and then applying it to the modern day is, it's kind of fascinating how studying history, thought processes of leaders and how they use the equipment, what's the limitations on it, and what they still accomplished. It kind of gives us no reason not to do the same.
Right.
So it's helped. It's kept the General Lejeune talks about the animated spirit in his. Lejeune. When he talks about the animated spirit, we hear about it. Do we actually listen to it? So long as that animated spirit continues to flourish, we're gonna be found worthwhile, right? So you kind of leading me down a path in terms of things come in cycles, right? Mm-hmm. And just coming off the heels of reading General Mattis's book, one of the things that he commented on regularly throughout the text is the importance of reading, mm-hmm. and to understand how problems as they presented themselves were solved previously. And that may not be a direct blueprint for how you resolve the situation that you're currently faced with, but it can kind of tip and cue you to some best practices and things that others have done in similar situations. And right now we are in the throes of a pivotal shift, mm-hmm. and the Commandant's planning guidance being out on the streets for quite a while now has generated no small amount of conversation, a lot of churn, mm-hmm. and there's quite a few of us, and you can read it on message boards and emails and some of the working groups that I've been part of, that it's a little daunting, because although General Neller directed us to not hold too dearly to any sacred cows, mm-hmm. it looks as though General Berger's ready to slaughter them. I'd agree. I think it's, yeah.
And some would argue to the detriment of who we are as a warfighting organization, because, if you go back to like the mission statement of the Marine Corps, those other tasks as directed by the president from time to time has really kind of been the prime focus for us, mm-hmm. as opposed to that naval integration piece. And you'll see things like, why does the Navy's Army need an Air Force? And that's a valid question. And historically, it's been because we prefer to have a Navy pilot flying over us and providing close air support, and a Marine pilot. I'm sorry, as opposed to a Navy or Air Force pilot, and the MAGTF as a whole being almost a force in readiness that can kind of stand alone for a significant period of time, 90 days, if that's the case. But those mental constructs and those hypothetical situations in which we would deploy in the near to midterm future, in that posture, seem to be limited, and so we're shifting our focus based upon concepts that have been disseminated throughout the Beltway and elsewhere to look at DMO, Distributed Maritime Operations, and EABO, Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, littoral operations and contested environment. All these things are now kind of coming back to where we were pre-World War II, right? Except for the 2020, 2025, 2030, 2040 timeframe. What does that look like? How are things different? And as you're coming towards the end of your tour as the operations chief for 3 MIG, are we ready? Are we ready to accept that we may not have tanks moving forward, or the same depth of artillery moving forward as we have in the past, and other capabilities, right?
You're asking, are we ready?
Are we ready to let some of those communities just...
If that's the decision that's made, that's the directions we have to go, right? Working the information operations thing for the last couple of years now, and I say couple of years with the MIG, and then prior to that I was at Mar 4 Cyber, and that feeds into information operations. Things are changing, and we have to change, or we will not survive. Okay, as in, I think an organization, and I'm the histories and traditions guy, right?
Right.
If we don't change because of traditions, that's very detrimental to our future. Right.
Do you think we'll get to a point where
technology, by kind of collecting historical artifacts and stuff of that nature, technology changes the battle space, period. There's hundreds and thousands of examples of technology changing the battle space, whether it's putting a round in the chamber faster, whether it's from, in my time, I've seen intelligence, then near real time, and then real time. That's a change. That's a big change. Where we're going now, it just makes a logical progression that you have to be able to make the decisions before someone even thinks about acting. So it's not just real time. It's what's past real time. You have to be able to predict, right? We have to change. It's social media, cyber. A lot of things are changing.
But we're still using a post-industrial era framework for acquisitions, for manpower accessions.
So you even said it. Commandant says, we're going to change. Are we ready for the change? Doesn't matter if we're ready or not. We have to change. Technology is changing. We have to change.
So, one of the key elements in the CPG has been divest to invest. Mm-hmm. And how slim, if Rich Deuto had his druthers, how slim would we go in terms of manpower, total end strength?
I'm not going to make that prediction.
No, not a prediction, but if it was up to you,
up to me, if I was commandant for the day and General
or Master Guns of the Marine Corps,
Master Guns of the Marine Corps. That's funny. Number wise, I think numbers depend on the technology we adapt to. However, we have to be prepared to still operate without those technologies. Okay, I'll just break it down to the simplest level. If your GPS goes down, you still need to know how to use a compass. Okay, if communications goes down, you still need to know how to use runners and yellow canaries. That's a real thing. That's not a
Deutoism.
It's not a Deutoism. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Deutoism. That's funny. So if you look at these changes that are on the horizon, okay, look at the changes when it went from the Marine Corps went from those small wars, to amphibious operations. Okay, there were some forward thinkers that said, here are the threats we think the nation is going to have, and let's get left of center, let's get left of bang. And history has said we did that. Okay? Maybe not as proficient as we thought we were, but it happened. We're at that point now where there is things are changing. That IP6, I think it is, Internet Protocol 6, that should change a battle space by itself. If every square inch of the planet is supposed to have there'll be enough IP addresses that every square inch of the planet will have its own IP address. That's big. That's big. Yeah. So,
do you think we're adopting technology at a point that is almost perilous?
What do you mean by that? I'm not.
So, for the dystopian science fiction fanatics amongst us, the John Stancils who abhor a Facebook page, right, or the Rich Deutos who adopt a pseudonym as they're transiting the interwebs, right?
Thanks.
Yeah. Do you think that our adoption rate or our interaction with each other in this interconnected fashion has some perils in it?
It does.
And how do we address that, right? Because we have to remain cognizant of the changes and evolve and adapt to them, and even potentially leverage that, right? But it comes at a price.
It does. It does. So, going to go back to the history thing, and this is not the Pacific or Marines. This is more of the European theater in World War II. Prior to D-Day, what happened to all the soldiers, airmen, and there were some Marines on capital ships and stuff of that nature, and there's some Marines ashore as well. Very, very few, but those Marines those troops got their orders, and they said, we're going to do this. You don't know where it's going to be. However, you've been training for it. We're going to keep you on base. You're not going on liberty. You're not doing any of this because we don't want this word to get out. Okay. That's, by those standards, that's a drastic measure. Okay. The way technology is, we have to adopt that same mental thinking in the technology realm. Don't go on liberty on the internet, right? It's the same thing. It's the battle space has changed. Technology has changed, and we talk about this as a big change. It is a big change to what we know. We don't know force on force. we knew it, and we got away from it. Now we're going back to it. Okay, so that's a change in the way of thinking. That is a big change in the way of thinking, and I say it as a generational thing. Like, I remember the Cold War. I joined right at the end of it, so there was still that
those remnants and those relics of that mindset.
Right.
Yeah.
All my master gunnies were Vietnam veterans. Those guys that, when I joined, those 30-year Marines were all Vietnam veterans. Okay. So they grew up during the Cold War. That's what I knew when I first came in the Marine Corps. And then in 2000, 2001, we started wearing this, terrorism. So we got away from that. Now we're going back to it, except all that experience is not there.
So how do we overcome that lack of experience?
We have to change. I think we got to change our mentality. We got to change the mentality. And this is where I don't want to pat myself on the back, but guys like Sergeant Major Marquez and guys that have been in those long time, we know what that's like. We know how it is to go out to the field without batteries and closer TA-312s with slash wire between positions. That's a secure comms.
Right.
It's very secure comms unless someone comes in and cuts the wire. But that's fairly secure comms. So how do we do that over long distances?
Yeah.
What is the long distance answer to TA-312s?
Free space optics.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I don't have the answer to that, and fortunately, we've got smarter, more capable researchers and think tanks, putting together solutions. But one of the things that I've come across in my time here at 3MEF in Okinawa has been the fact that when you rub shoulders with these guys out at Naval Postgraduate School, Naval War College, Lincoln Labs, MIT. I mean, you name it. The list goes on and on and on. They're having conversations and they're developing initiatives geared towards their predictions on the future operational environment, but they're still woefully disconnected from the operating forces to a way that it's to our detriment. And there's some inherent assumptions in their decision-making process that I think is going to inhibit progress because they're not allowing for that bottom-up refinement. And so how do we counter that? Because in their ivory towers, in the Beltway, and in academia, they're spiraling up capabilities, but our ability to actually employ them sufficiently in order to leverage an advantage in the battle space may be a foregone conclusion, in that we won't be able to do so because of that lack of that tacit connection between us and them.
Okay, so once again, I'll go back to history. I'll use the Sherman tank as an example. It was an inferior tank to anything in the European theater. There was some stuff, but we had we had numbers. We had the industrial base behind. We had the industrial base behind the military force. Okay, the Sherman tank was not a match to the Tigers in any way, shape, or form. However, there were ways that the junior guys took the piece of gear that they had and they adapted to be able to win those battles, whatever that may be. Okay. Is it a little bit more dangerous than further back shooting, or did you have to get up close and hide and not move, wait for them to come into your kill boxes on your terms to engage the enemy for your advantage?
Right.
Right. So we can give our inputs, and I'm not saying we rest assured at it, but whatever we get, we need to employ it the way and the most effective way possible. And usually it's the junior guy that works on it all the time is the one who has the best answer. Right?
Right.
data communications. There was, I think it was something in the early 80s, a piece of comm gear Marine Corps had, an 06. He worked on it all the time, and he figured out you can message with it. He came up with that. That was the junior guy, right? So they're there. Just, you soon are going to have to listen to those guys.
Right.
Right.
And so that's been one of the interesting byproducts of this podcast is that it's put me in arm's distance electronically from pretty much anybody in the OC field that's willing to engage. And I've had everybody from Lance Corporals up to Master Guns shoot me messages, retired and still on active duty, shoot me messages and provide me some input, things to consider, things to cover. And then, of course, ask questions about their specific situation in terms of career advice and things of that nature. And you kind of see the same thing taking place at the 26XX opportunities page on Facebook, run by some of our Chief Warrant Officers, Acevedo, Cruz, and others, and Claypool, if I'm not mistaken, say Kim. But what kind of concerns me is that in some of that interaction, I start to see that there's a lack of maybe professional development of our subordinates, or to grab a term that I think is probably near and dear to both of our hearts is mentoring. And one of the Marines had posted up kind of his experiences having multiple conversations with multiple guys looking to transition out and helping prep them for the life ahead outside the Marine Corps. Some good pieces of information that they need to be able to incorporate into their mindset as they're gearing up to exit service. But one of them was specifically about mentors, and I kind of honed in on that and addressed it. But before I kind of get into that, at what point in time did Rich Deuto start actively seeking out mentors?
Okay. So I can tell you there's kind of a two-pronged side to that. One is I always actively sought out who I wanted to be like and what they knew and what I could learn from somebody.
Who taught you that?
Who did I? That was...
Who taught you to do that?
That was just by observation. That guy's successful. When I joined the Marine Corps, I knew when I got off the bus, everyone goes, "What did I do?" When I got off the bus, my first thought was, I am finally here. That was my first thought. Then afterwards, it was, I heard the stories, but this is not what I expected type thing, right? But so mentors were even before I joined the Marine Corps. My father, best mentor. He's still my mentor. When I grow up, I want to be like my dad. I still do. All right. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I saw the ones I wanted to be like. Then I learned you can learn something from every single Marine. And this is as I was a junior Marine. Okay, it's either, I would say about 80% is positive. There's others that, okay, that's not, I learned from them, but that's not what I want to do. Right. That's not what I want to do. I will tell you.
Everybody can be an example, either a good example or a
bad example. Right. But even those bad examples, they have those gyms, right? Broken clocks are right twice a day, right? I'll get back to him later, but a guy by the name of Timothy Morrison is probably the most natural leader I've ever come across in the Marine Corps, but he was the biggest leadership challenge I ever had. Company I in the early 2000s. Okay.
Timothy Morrison?
Timmy Mo. Everyone called him Timmy Mo. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and believe it or not, Timmy Mo. Get back to him later, but there's a lot of sea stories about him. So I don't know when it happened. But at some point in my time in the Marine Corps, I started learning from the junior guys. And some of those junior guys they mentored me as a leader. I didn't actively tell them that, but I mean, just by the way they acted and how they performed, there were certain things that I saw that were just, they're pretty incredible. The organization, I think, as a whole is pretty incredible, but there's, that's one of the things that I can't pinpoint when it happened, but it happened.
When you started learning from your subordinates.
Correct. There is a time, because there's a time when you stop learning the buttonology and you have to learn the employment of things.
Right.
Okay. So those guys that are doing the buttons, they're the guys that know how to work the equipment that you have to listen to say, hey, we can employ it a different way because of X, Y, and Z. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I remember there was a couple of times where I did the whole Letters to Garcia thing. And I'm going to tell you, I think that's a bad book. I learned from experience that that's a bad book. Don't ask questions, figure it out on your own and try. Yeah, there are times you can ask why and can you explain something to me, staff sergeant, gunner, wherever you're at, whatever level you're at. I think my first real mentor, and this is going to sound kind of the one that really taught me a lot about leadership was Paul Bergeron. And that was later. I was a master. He was a master gunny, and about the same age. But he was definitely opened my eyes to the fact that there are sometimes you don't know everything, and swallow the pride pill and ask questions.
Ask why.
Ask the why. And if I had a Paul Bergeron maybe as a newly promoted staff sergeant, some of those hard-learned lessons, like stepping on myself and hurting, maybe I wouldn't have had those, right? But
yeah, I've heard Paul's been referred to in the past as the Godfather.
He's the Godfather. If you see a picture of him now, it looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah, I've not seen a picture of him in quite a while. He pulled me aside and gave me some really sharp guidance and advice when I was in the middle of a substantial transition, moving from one billet to the next. I crossed over to the DIA for a hot minute, and I was still kind of unsure whether or not that was the play, because I thought it was going to be taking me out of play, that I may have been better served if I was going to stay in the Marine Corps, which is what I was doing, that maybe some other route would have been a better approach. I may have, to my peers and to others in my local surroundings, it made it look like I knew exactly what I was doing, but I didn't. And to have somebody like Bergeron, who was down, I think he was the Ockfield specialist at the time, to kind of talk with him and get his perspective and his take. And he's like, "You'll be fine." The way that the board will look at it, young gunny going outside of the 2600 community, go do something in the human side of things, outside of your MOS, but still within intelligence. You're going to come back more well-rounded with a different perspective that most SIGINTers won't have the opportunity to won't have the luxury to have under their belt like you will. And you'll still be using your language. You understand exactly how a country team operates. You'll understand how another key IC partner conducts business, and I did. I definitely prefer the singing side of things, to say the least. Not that I got a bad touch out of DIA, but I definitely don't want to be touched by them again. If I can avoid it, we'll do the touching on my terms moving forward. But that was great, And for me, I learned before the Marine Corps that you've got to have mentors. Mm-hmm. My father couldn't provide me everything I needed to be successful in this world. He provided me a lot, and more than enough, but there were other things that I wanted to learn how to do that Dad wasn't adept at. And some of it was in my interaction with, Vietnam era veterans that came back to my hometown of Galveston and were community leaders with the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, community organizers, political activists, veterans' rights advocates, guys who took it upon themselves to reach out to at-risk youth and monitor, mentor, guide, protect, advise, educate, in certain instances, train. I was in the 7th grade, and one of my mentors, Army vet Johnny Enriquez, said, "I need you to coach a basketball team." Like, I suck at basketball, Johnny. And he's like, "Doesn't matter. I'm hurting for coaches, and you can do it." Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I took a basketball team, and I knew how to develop plays. Mm-hmm. I couldn't play basketball, but that was kind of like my first foray into mentoring others. Mm-hmm. And I had a horrible team. We were just getting stomped by all the other talent in the league, but it was a learning opportunity. And I had a situation where one of my star player, who I'm friends with on Facebook to this day, he's only a few years younger than me, got frustrated because he was the only performer in his mind, and probably objectively, and so he would just take the ball and try to score at every possession, and he didn't want to follow the plan because I was trying to get the other kids into the scheme of maneuver, so I benched him, and he wasn't happy about it. But I had, a lot of the parents come up and talk to me later, and it's like, we really appreciate, what you did, and we understand why, and all that, to include the young man's father. But carrying those experiences into the Marine Corps and showing up at the fleet as a sergeant, going back to what you said, I had to learn from my lance corporals. Mm-hmm. Had no problem with that. Fortunately, they allowed me to learn from, as far as team operations are concerned. I did a riverine training team deployment to Bolivia, and got to see how a team operated before I had to be a team leader. But as soon as I got back from that deployment, I got assigned my team. In our first Field X, they gave me Aaron McLean as my ATL, who had plenty of team leader experience, but he was on his way out in terms of PCS, and so it allowed me to have someone who had done it before as my ATL to kind of answer questions, and kind of provide me some rudder steers. But once that first Field X was done, training wheels were off, and I had to kind of figure it out on my own. What I learned was, at least at Ready Battalion at the time, 2nd Ready Battalion at the time, if you could just be a sergeant, mm-hmm. the SIGINT things would follow on later, and so having that I guess that presence, mm-hmm. To just grab any sergeant out of Ready Battalion and say, I need you to go link up with 3-8 and get ready to deploy.
Yep.
Right. If that's sappy plates, if that's ammo draw, if that's, everything that goes into, we're leaving tomorrow, and tomorrow was Operation Secure Tomorrow, mm-hmm. In Haiti, and with the Air Contingency MAGTF, the ability to do that I don't think is as widespread as we would hope that it would be amongst the 2600s. And kind of talking to Tom Dean in a still to be released episode, that was one of his concerns when he saw me and another Marine, Kelly Kuda, going to the fleet as sergeants. In my case, never having been to the fleet before, right? Like how those sergeants and the grunts have already earned their bones. They've earned their stripes and made their bones earn their stripes, and now you're going to have to run neck and neck with those guys, because if you can't, your Marines will suffer the consequences. And I say that to say we kind of had some of the similar concerns with regard to the operations chief billets in the MiG, right? Because our master guns that we place there are going to have to garner the respect of all of subordinate command operations chiefs across that organization. How hard was that for you?
I don't think it was that hard, because when I came in, I was like, being time at Marfor Cyber with the OPTs of the 1700 Ockfield, the way the 06 changed, the changes within the 2600 field, that was kind of a nucleus of the MiG. Okay, so I had an idea. Now, realizing that those master gunnies have been in those fields for those different battalions, it's their battalions, going to them and saying, tell me about your battalion. Here's my background. Teach me. I think there was some, if you go in thinking you know everything, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt the organization. That's going to hurt command relationships. The biggest one I had to learn was probably Anglico, because those guys they go out on a deployment, they come back, rest for a couple of weeks, do some annual training, and then they're back out again. Those teams, and that was something that I didn't quite understand. I knew what their mission was, but I didn't know how they operated. Okay, that's something that if I need something from them, or I need a question answered, I would go to those ops chiefs and ask them. And then I would say, hey, I need this, whatever the task is. MEF is requesting this. I need a couple bodies from each battalion. What can you spare? Because I know you have these deployments coming up. You'll work with them. They're Marines, they're men, they're leaders, and I don't think I had an issue. I'm not saying that was God's gift to the MiGs. I'm not saying that at all. It's just if I had a question, just ask it, right?
A little bit of just humility.
Oh yeah, I mean, you don't know it. You don't know everything. There's master gunnies are technical experts in their field. Right? So knowing that, use that Marine as the technical expert. He is the expert in that field. Ask him what is good and what is not. I don't think I had any issue. The professional relationships across the board have been very rewarding. And it's also different to it's different to work outside of the SIGINT community to see kind of the whole, even going out to the wing, MEFEX, we had to work with the wing and we had to work with MLG, and within the MiG staff itself, you got former pilots, former backseaters to prowlers, and ground officers and intel officers and guys and officers I've served with at Radio Battalion or within one of the letter companies, and you got 06s and MAGTAF planners. That's, boy, I tell you what, you get a really good appreciation of what the Marine Corps can do. It's opening up your aperture and you go to a sergeant or a staff sergeant and say, hey, tell me what your job is. Tell me everything you know about MAGTAF planning, right? They get really excited when a master gunny comes to them and says, teach me about your job. right? And they will tell you everything, and you got to pull them back and say, whoa, 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 whoa.
Too much, right?
Too much.
Yeah.
Too much. But no, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Call it LBWA, leadership by walking around, and it works. It works.
So I want to circle back to something that was a little bit of a watershed moment for me and my family recently, and you were more than just helpful, a wealth of information towards kind of dialing in on that. And I mentioned it sometime in some episodes in the past with regard to some of our family history in the Marine Corps. Unlike Rich Deuto, I didn't grow up with a Master Guns underneath the same roof as me, and I really didn't know I had a lot of military in my family up until after I joined the Marine Corps, and then they started popping up out of nowhere. Oh, your Uncle Augie was this, and your Uncle Raymond was that, and your Uncle Machik was this, and your Uncle Bull was that, and it was like why didn't I know this growing up? I knew some of it, but not all of it, not to the extent that I did. And when I would come home from leave, my dad would tell me, "Hey, your Uncle Raymond wanted you to stop by so he could talk to you." And when I did, I mean, hell, I wish I'd have had a setup like this. I could have recorded it because he's no longer here with us, and so when I came home after Enrique was born, and I introduced him to the family, I was so Rich. I was in my blues, presenting my son to my great grandmother and at a family gathering around Christmas time, and because he had just been born in October, so he was just still a newborn, and in our conversation, which took place in Spanish, which in the Castro family is somewhat unique because my generation doesn't speak Spanish. Even my sons are fighting me on Spanish. After so many generations in Texas, we lose it, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is predicated on economic opportunities, and if you want to be, most of the men in my family were railroad, worked on trains as carmen, and for you to be a foreman, you had to understand English. You're not. I mean, you're more than just a laborer. You've got to be able to do payroll and reports and stuff like that. And so having English under your belt is one of those things that is a requirement. And it was one of the reasons why the family kind of dropped Spanish after so many generations, compounded by the fact that in Texas at least, Mexican Americans were physically struck for speaking Spanish in school. So fast forward to 2001, Corporal Castro is a Spanish cryptologic linguist at the Defense Language Institute, right? I'm getting, or waiting to get flip pay. I wasn't getting flip pay at the time, right? It's funny how things can be somewhat ironic in that regard. And I'm having this conversation with my grandmother, and she tells me just kind of offhand about her brother, Sambo, and and I started to dig in and got a little bit more information from her daughters and my grandfather and some of my uncles, and I come to find out that Ruben Adame, PFC Ruben Adame, also known as Sambo was a pejorative nickname given to him because he was darker than your average Mexican, was for the Looney Tunes character Little Black Sambo, the African with the bone in his nose and the spear and all of that. But he was a hell of an athlete from Alvin, Texas, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps and was assigned to 1-1 Charlie Company during the Korean War, and they never found his body. And that was pretty much all the family knew at that point in time. And so I kind of never really dug into it too much until years later, 2008 timeframe, and the family members that did remember him, their memories starting to get a little more hazy, and as oral traditions can from time to time until you write them down and document them and record them. And so I started digging into a little bit more. And around that time, like I said, I'd been assigned to Goodfellow as an instructor, course supervisor, and my uncle Robert had asked me to kind of dig into a little bit more to get some more detail, and I did. And eventually I was able to find two individuals, one by the name of Norm Callahan and the other by the name of, is it Ray or Ron Broward? I want to make sure I get this right. It's Ron Broward, and who at that time were still making regular trips to look for the remains of their brethren. And eventually I was able to get both of them up on the line for a phone conversation, which extended kind of like a predecessor to Top Game for about an hour and a half each, almost 2 hours. And to sit there and listen to those old timers tell their tale, God, I wish I would have recorded them. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. And even my memory of their conversations isn't completely accurate, just by the nature of just time. It's over 11 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. But what I remember distinctly from the conversations were the fact that they remembered Sambo, that he was a hell of a fighting man, that he had been with them on the Battle of Horseshoe Ridge, and they had dug into a position and had killed so many Chinese that they were just running out of ammo, and they had sent him to go get more, and he never returned. And that's pretty much the extent of it. I found out somewhat recently that they may have identified his dog tags in a mass burial site, but not his remains, or at least not that which they've been able to confirm. And in those conversations with Mr. Callahan and Mr. Broward, one of the key takeaways were you fight the war you're given, and no man is gone until he's forgotten. And those two dictums have stuck with me through the years, and I've kind of given it to Marines in bits and doses. Whenever they kind of start to demonstrate that they're lamenting their position, either be it at 3MEF or at Goodfellow mm-hmm. Air Force Base or you name it, you fight the war you're given, right? And if the case is right now you're the SSR, so be it, right? It won't be what you'll do indefinitely. Mm-hmm. You stick around long enough, and you'll get exposed to the spectrum of operations. But somewhat recently, I was able to travel to Seoul, and a great friend of ours by the name of Don Bruckshin, former Marine, comp guy, is now the attaché for the Department of Homeland Security at the U.S. Embassy Seoul, and he also covers Tokyo as well. So kind of dual-hatted, does a lot of traveling. So when we can sync our calendars up and see each other either here in Oki or there in Korea, we do so at every opportunity. And it had invited us down to come hang out and kind of see the sights. And he remembered from our time together where we first met in the Dominican Republic that I had a relative who had died in the Korean War, and asked me to kind of see if I could find, where. Mm-hmm. And, between you and I and some others online at the Korean War Veteran Project, based out of Texas, if I'm not mistaken, I got some pin drops. And we the first morning that we were there in Seoul, got up early. Me, him, one of his employees who assisted us in terms of interpretation with some of the locals in and around the area, and my two sons, jumped in a 12-pack passenger van and headed about 2 hours out to Chuncheon, to where they were last reported, and kind of pulling up some of the historical archives from the Marine Corps Historical Association and all of that. We were able to kind of war game out exactly where it was. It took some trial and error, but eventually we found it. And once we got up to the top, you're able to kind of see and appreciate in a way that a phone call or a map chip in some PDF file that you downloaded from usmc.mil just can't convey. Mm-hmm. And it was so silent, but you could feel like something severe had occurred there. And the fact that some of the machine gun emplacements were those fighting holes were still dug out and somewhat preserved. And we snapped some photos and I grabbed some video of that, and I plan to include that into the show notes for this episode. But just the tone and the mood for that terrain walk, if you will, really kind of solidified the gravity of the conflict that took place then and there, and so I think I can finally appreciate why you've dug in so deeply with the historical aspect in the way in which you have. But for me, like that personal connection was really what kind of really synced up and established that the importance of all of that for me, and by extension for my sons. But one of the key elements of that site visit was the fact that when we left, we found some of the locals that we had kind of spoken to before we walked up to the ridgeline. They came out to ask some more questions of us, and one individual in particular who wasn't originally from that area, but had retired there after a life of hard work and sacrifice in Seoul, and then kind of retired out in that rural district. Him and his wife, and he was asking questions of our interpreter. What he asked was what prompted them to come out here and visit, and the Korean national basically said, my boss's friend here, his one of his relatives died fighting up in and around this area, and they never found his body. And the response to that from the local was, that it was astonishing that we would fly out from Texas from the United States to visit the site of his passing. And when that was relayed back to me, I explained that no, we didn't fly out from the United States. What actually transpired was we flew from Okinawa, because that's where I'm stationed at, me and my family. And his response to that through the interpreter was, that's even more impressive because of the fact that despite our family shedding blood in Korea, that we're still here ready for the next confrontation. And I didn't grasp that until he verbalized it. And it kind of goes back to the fact that, we don't see ourselves really in the way in which others see us. And our interpretation of others may not necessarily be how they see themselves. Mm-hmm. And so, kind of tying that to a running theme in a lot of our conversations on the show has been about the imposter syndrome. And you and I had talked about this in a previous conversation before we actually sat down to record. But, how do you see yourself, and is that, in your experience, at odds with how others see you? And, because one of the things that you mentioned to me was that I've kind of normalized professional insecurity through this podcast. and is that a good thing?
Normalize professional insecurity. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I will tell you that listening to some of the podcasts where I've been stationed with some of those Marines, I've tended to think, well, things that I was experiencing, I was like, those guys aren't experiencing it. So I need to either suck it up and carry on and do the same level as they are, or better, not to make myself look better, just to make it for the organization's sake, right? Hearing some of your prior podcasts, to hear some of the people I respect, and I still respect them. I'm not saying I don't respect them after listening to that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But people that I respected and I still respect, hearing them say certain things, it's like, I didn't know they were going through that same thing I was at the same time. So I always thought, I was like, man, I think at times I felt comparing myself to those individuals, that I was behind the power curve. Maybe I needed to get up to their level, or pull more weight because they're pulling a lot of weight. I think it comes to that. That's what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to give examples, but hearing, Kyle Cornett, I got mad respect for him. We went on a MU years ago, and I had some issues. There were some training issues, and then some personal issues upon the training issues, and went through a divorce, and I was fighting for custody of my oldest son. I think over the years I've felt like I've had to regain some ground from that time, and the only thing I could do was tuck in my chin, drop my right shoulder, and run forward. Right. Sean Nicow, I think he is a very technically proficient Marine, and trying with his experiences, and we all have different experience. We all go to different duty stations. So his technical experience, learning, what I learned from him is get the doctrine, learn the doctrine, employ the doctrine, and you can't go wrong. Sam Carter, incredible. You can't, the most well-spoken, well-articulated, most command presence Marine I have ever come across. Scott Darbert, extremely, he's extremely smart, and he can think out, he can plan. It seems like he can see over the horizon when it comes to his planning aspects. I think we all have our strengths, but when I see that, trying to kind of myself trying to, how do I get up to that level so for the organization's sake,
right?
Do I am I on that same par? I need to prove that every day. I need to do something to go forward and to prove, I think, to myself that I rate to be in that club with those guys. So,
but that's a foregone conclusion, right? I mean,
yeah, it's still
post selection to Master Guns.
Yeah, but you still, you have to earn. You've earned the Eagle Globe and Anchor,
right?
You earn it, right? You've earned it, okay. But you have to prove that you can keep wearing it,
okay,
every day. Does that make sense?
Boy, does it ever.
Okay, so you come up for re-enlistment, you got to prove to the Marine Corps that you still rate to wear it. You've earned it, but if you want to keep wearing it, you need to prove that you rate to keep wearing it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's what we meant when we talked before. But I hope I don't embarrass those guys, and I hope I don't embarrass myself. But I tell you what, there's a lot of really, really good Marines, and a lot of really good Marines of character within the Marine Corps. And, there's some that got out. There's some that retired sooner than if they would have stayed in, maybe I would not have gotten this far, right? I can think of at least 6 or 7 Marines that were senior to me or my peers that if they would have stayed in, I probably would not have made it this far. And that's the God honest truth.
So let me ask you, when did you cross over into the 2600 community? Because you were initially of a different tribe.
Sure was. I crossed over in 1996. Sure did.
And what were you before?
I was in the Marine Corps.
You were in the Marine Corps?
I was in the Marine Corps.
Well, I would hope so, before you lat moved.
Some people know, some people don't. All right. Okay, here it goes. I was a 5500.
Which is?
It was a bandsman. I was in the band. So, yeah. It was...
So you left Master Guns Deuto's household, joined the Marine Corps, yellow footprints.
Hold
I'm
on.
finally here. Hold on, no, let me finish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm finally here. That's what you said, right? I'm finally here.
Yep.
And, after a childhood of
Yep.
Y harness and
Yep.
ammo cans and e-tools and all of that, and you were a 5500, joined the band.
Yeah, I sure was.
What did you play?
Trombone.
Trombone.
Yep.
Played the bone.
So yeah. Don't go the other route. I know what you're thinking. I know what everyone else is thinking. So when I first joined the Marine Corps, I signed a 6-year contract. The recruiter said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to shoot machine guns out of doors of helicopters. That's what I want to do." And then I
saw Full Metal Jacket.
Okay. So anyway, I was going to poolie meetings, and I was that guy that showed up really early. So there was an all-state band tryout, and I was scared. I don't want to say scared. I was hesitant to tell my recruiters that I wasn't going to make the poolie meeting. So I didn't make the poolie meeting, and I made all-state band, so I went to all-state band. And they were really worried because I was the guy who always showed up and all that stuff early, and I didn't even show up at all. So they called, and my mom said I was at Allstate. So I come into the recruiter's office. They're like, "Hey, you didn't tell us you played an instrument."
There happened to be a quota that they needed to fill in the 5500 octane.
So I didn't know this at the time, but that 6-year contract, I was one. I counted as one guy in the Marine Corps. At the time, if you recruited a bandsman, it was 2 people in the Marine Corps. So that recruiter, I didn't know that, right?
He got double credit.
So they said, "Hey, you need to make up this poolie meeting," and we went to Camp Lejeune. And at the time, it was right after the Gulf War, and all of 2MEF was on the parade deck. All of 2MEF. So at the time, it was the FSSG, right? And it was the division and the wing, and they were all online. And the Cherry Point Band and Camp Lejeune Band had combined, and they did this giant sound off. And I thought it was cool. I thought the ceremony was cool. I was looking at all the helicopters and the formation in the background and the snap and pop. And I was like, yes, this is great.
Pageantry.
This is awesome. Right. And we went to the 2nd Marine Division Band, this guy named Master Gunnery Sergeant Mike, who turned out to be a legend. And his son is, last I heard, his son is a Master Gunny. I think he's down at Parris Island right now. He's a Master Gunny now. And supposedly, if you pass this guy's audition, that meant you were good. You're in. But I didn't know this guy. I didn't know it. And I didn't even know I was auditioning. I was told to bring my horn. I played from some scales and stuff like that. And then it's like, yep, you made it. It was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 people auditioning. I was the only one to make it. So Master Gunny Mike, we talked about a doorknob for half an hour. It was a brass doorknob. These Marines polish this every day. They polish it in the morning. They polish it in the afternoon. And I was like getting all pumped up and everything. And then he says, you made it. And you passed the audition. And so ego started and my head started getting big. And I was like, hey, I made the Marine Corps Band. I didn't even know I was auditioning. So my recruiters, they pushed it. And I said, fine, I'll do it. And after I did it, I went from a 6-year contract to a 4-year contract. The only good thing my dad said was, I'm glad you have a 4-year contract now, because my dad was a recruiter and he was recruiter of the year in the early 70s, 1973. And he goes, I'm glad you only have a 4-year contract. And I went through boot camp. It was great. Went through MC2. It was great. And my first day at the School of Music in Little Creek, Virginia, I was like, this is not what I went through and what I wanted to do. So I did what I had to do. I had to pass the school because at the time, downsizing from Gulf War,
right.
If a page 11 at the time, they harped on it. If you get a page 11, you're not going to be able to re-enlist and stay in the Marine Corps. And so took it to heart and graduated. But I will say this, I think things happen for a reason. Because when I did lap move, I was at, my first unit was 3MEF, second unit was Parris Island. Came time to lap move, and I knew I was in a critical field, so I had to pick something that was
also critical.
More critical, not just critical, more critical. So I started looking down the line that said 250 boat spaces for lap move. I said, I will do this. They said, oh, Morse code intercept operator. And I go, you still copy Morse code? Yeah. So this is what I mean by things have happened for a reason. I went through Morse code school and I did really well. It was a self-paced course.
Right.
I just spent 4 years listening to how tones have to match, and I had the ear so I could pick up rhythm, and I just thought it was just rhythm. It was just songs to me. Quebec is da 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 da, right? And first time I heard Quebec, I said that's a funeral dirge, da 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 da, right? So I was like, okay, Quebec, and I heard those. I heard all those little rhythms, and when you take the characters and put them together, I heard different Marine Corps marches, and I could identify them by who wrote the marches, either Alfred Reed or John Philip Sousa. I was like, all right, this is easy. This is cool. So I actually went through basic Morse pretty quick enough that I had to wait for my clearance to get adjudicated before I could go to advanced Morse.
Tell me about it.
So, but it was, things happen for a reason. And
definitely.
And I think maybe that time doing that, knowing that I wanted to do something else, maybe there was some things that happened, and if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have my oldest son, who's a sergeant in Lithuania right now on MSG duty.
Good son.
Right, and third generation Marine. I'm very proud of him. He's my son, and I'm proud he's.
What's his MOS when he's not MSG in it up?
He's a supply. It's kind of funny. He asked me, he says, Dad, I want to be a Sigener. And I told him, hell no.
Why?
I said, no.
Why not?
And I said, I'm still in.
Uh-huh.
I said, I don't even want you in the HUMIC community or O2 community. I said, it's too close to the intel. I said, if you're going to join the Marine Corps, you join and you make a name for yourself. You don't.
So I understand that, but I also see the value in ensuring that the arc field that you're employed in is going to provide you with marketable and lucrative skills on the back end. And don't get me wrong, I know supply can do that in terms of logistics, and there's a huge demand for that in the private sector. But I mean, SIGIN's so delicious.
It is, but like I told my son, I said, you're going to make a name for yourself. I don't want you. I also told him, I said, I have friends in the Marine Corps, and if you ever call them for a favor, I will come down on you of 244 years of Marine Corps customs and traditions. And but
so what if supply doesn't work out for him after his exposure to the intelligence community, being at MSG, the different all the different agencies underneath the umbrella of the country team and all of that. He wants to do something. Let's just say, for instance, Chief of Station gets his hooks in him. Like, what would you say to him wanting to come over then, or now?
It's his decision,
right?
All right. So I didn't want him to be, like I said, he needed to make a name for himself. If he was old enough to join the Marine Corps, with my background and what I do, I don't want anyone to think that I forced my son to join the Marine Corps.
Why are you looking at the laptop as
I see the big red space there. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, I don't. If he's old enough to join, he's old enough to make his own decisions. And that was the only thing I told him.
That's fair.
I said, if you're going to join it, you're going to be a big boy. You be a big boy on your own. I don't want you anywhere near my arc field.
So now that we're on the topic of family, I know you got remarried, and you made the decision. I would assume collectively to take these orders to Okinawa as a GO bachelor. How difficult has that been for you over these past couple of years?
My wife, Semper Fidelis to God, family, country, Corps. Okay. Marine Corps even says, put your family first. And so before, long story short, I had orders to Georgia. And I thought as a master gunny at a MAR 4 going to Georgia, that might not be the right, to be the senior enlisted. And one of the last senior enlisted as a master gunny. I didn't know if that was good for the Marine Corps, the image for junior Marines, or utilizing what I could still offer the Marine Corps. It just so happened the Galaxy list came out and the MiG ops chief positions opened up. I looked at Okinawa, and first thing I did is I went to go talk to my wife, and she goes, she says, why Okinawa? And I said, professionally, I've been out to the Pacific, been to Company I, 3rd Radio, been to 3MEF numerous times. I just went through MAR 4 Cyber. These MiGs are standing up. Drank from the fire hose at MAR 4 Cyber. Talked to her about it. She goes, I do not want to go to Georgia. I said, I will support you going to Okinawa unaccompanied, but our daughter and our son, so I have a son on the autism spectrum, and our daughter competes internationally for this acro competition stuff. And there's nothing in Okinawa. And I said,
what's acro?
Acro is kind of a gymnastic dance. I don't want to say acrobatic, but it's kind of a mixture of it.
Okay.
Right. And she's been to Switzerland. She's doing really good. And I don't think it was fair to uproot my son and also my daughter, when that's what she really liked. And
arguably, the family would probably be EF&P'd out. They wouldn't get the country clearance
correct.
if they couldn't provide the services for your son out here.
That's correct. And that was one of the things, too, is I had to in order to execute orders, I took my son was getting his care in Maryland, did the whole exemption thing, so where basically I could execute orders and he stays back. We talked about it. I told the monitor, I said, hey, I'm due to check into Georgia on August 15th or August 16th of whatever year it was. I said, if you cut me orders to Okinawa for 3 meg, I'll report on the same date. No questions. And at the time he asked me, he says, why? And I told him, it's experience in the Pacific and all that stuff with MAR4 Cyber as well, understanding what was going on. So with the MiGs as well. And I think the thing too, if you're willing to stay in, you need to take on more responsibility. You need to for the organization's sake, give back as much as it's given you. And I think going from a MAR4 to a company was not really the right thing. It just made sense to come out to 3 MiG professionally and for the Marine Corps.
Are you satisfied with the fact that we've gutted those billets for Master Gunnery Sergeants at the letter companies throughout MCSB?
I am too. I am, and I'll tell you why. Because remember, I told you Paul Bergeron was my mentor, but it was late as a Master Sergeant. Right. One of the things he told me, he says, you need to set yourself up in positions starting as a staff sergeant to be able to get to where you want to go. Right. So when I was a staff sergeant, what did I see across? I saw senior enlisted in MCSB. I saw operations chiefs at Radio Battalion and the senior enlisteds at the company. So I figured that's what we had to do. And as you start growing up, you're like, well, what's past that? How do we get to senior enlisted advisor for DERNZA, right? What do we have to do that? Okay, you need to work for generals and stuff of that nature. It's a company. Master sergeants are more than capable of doing that. I understand why they put master gunnies there originally, because you got Marines at duty stations or at bases that usually there's command master chiefs and command sergeant majors and command chief master sergeants in the Air Force, and you need that same sort of senior enlisted across the
parity,
board.
that rank parity.
That rank parity. But I think we have really good master sergeants that can handle that.
Yeah, I had no doubt whatsoever that Master Sergeant Loretta Sonneman was able to hold her own at Company I before she got pinned and moved over to K-Bay. And same thing applies with Master Sergeant Chris Thomason. I'm sure he's holding his own out there as they tagged out and he cross-decked over. And the same thing applies, elsewhere at the other letter companies. But it kind of brings into my next question. You were contemplating a second lap move.
I was actually contemplating the 1700 Ockfield.
That was the 1791?
1799s.
1799s?
I had put all that effort into MAR4 Cyber. I put a lot of effort off duty. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm putting myself on a soapbox. That's not what I'm doing. There was a mission. You have to do it. You do what you got to do to get it accomplished. So when I went to MAR4 Cyber, it was I didn't know the difference between a switch and a server. And that's the God honest truth. If it wasn't for YouTube, I would not have known. Anytime those questions came up, I just, what is the difference?
Not just Lance Corporals use YouTube to learn new information.
I think I used it once to figure out how to set up antennas at Radio Battalion for the systems that they had at the time. But yeah, it's a good piece of gear. It's a good piece of gear. The put in all this effort it was over a year and a half. It seemed like my existence was OPT to get how do we get this 1700 OC field stood up? It was interaction between the 06 community, the 2600 community, even the 02 community to get this whole OC field up to get this capability that the Marine Corps wanted to invest in. Okay. I thought about it. The only thing I could think of is the only reason to do it is to be what it kind of boiled down to is I would be one of the first ones in it. And I was like, is that really, there's some really good guys that could get promoted into the master gunny positions that are at the team levels. I'm already there, right? I'm already there. I executed orders. I still had the opportunity. I had the package together, and I just looked at it, and I was like, I'm here. What benefit to the Marine Corps would it be for me to lat move again? Right? Promote from within, from the guys that are doing the button pushing. Right? I just didn't. It would have been I think it would have been a selfish reason.
Okay.
To lat move. I didn't see any benefit for the Marine Corps to do it. And at the MIG, right. Oh man, that was fun. I've had a great time at the MIG. Just when I say that, it's working without doctrine and trying to figure this out of how to implement this thing in there. I tell you what, it's been really rewarding. There's been a lot of work for sometimes very little results. And yeah. There's been a lot of results for very little work. But I mean, it's interesting, and to have the opportunity to work with not just the 2600 community, but all these different OC fields and different aspects of the Marine Corps is that's pretty exciting. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's pretty exciting.
So let's nerd out a little harder.
Sure.
During your time there at the MIG, and my time here at 3MEF, we've seen the advent of information as a warfighting function. Mm-hmm. So now there's 7, right? Mm-hmm. So lucky number 7. And my question, I asked this previously in mixed audience, a mixed company rather, with some of your officers in the MIG ops section, not to start a fight,
no issue,
but to genuinely initiate an honest dialogue and discussion. Does the advent of information as a warfighting function supersede intelligence as a warfighting function, with the understanding that structurally within Headquarters Marine Corps' table of organization, the Deputy Commandant of Information has the Director of Intelligence as a subordinate?
So we started off with technology changes the battle space.
Right.
Does it not?
But the organizational structure doesn't necessarily reflect the mutually supporting and arguably parity, right? Rank parity between information and intelligence.
Intelligence is, I gotta be careful on this one.
Yep.
Intelligence is information.
Intelligence is information. Is information intelligence?
And is information intelligence? It could be. Does intelligence provide support for every warfighting function? Air intelligence, ground intelligence, naval intelligence, information intelligence, right? And with the way that information /intelligence is embedded within technology, the lines between operations, intelligence, and communications are blurred.
Okay.
So you even stated what the commandant said, right? What was the words you used about General Neller said it was everything's on the table.
No sacred cows.
No sacred cows.
Right.
And then the current commandant, you said,
He's
is
ready to
willing
slaughter
to
'em.
slaughter them.
Right.
That's part of the slaughter. It could be part of the slaughter.
So then, arguably, if DCI's preeminence or position of primacy over intelligence undermines the relationship between intelligence and ground or aviation, then the DC of ground or the DC of aviation should have their own director of intelligence.
So are you assuming there's going to be a DCI of, by going to slaughter the cow,
Right.
is there going to be, is that on the table? Is that going to be slaughtered? Is the MAGTF going to be, I don't know. Is it going to be broken? Is that on the table?
I don't know, but I guess what I'm getting at is the subordinate structure of intelligence underneath information within Headquarters Marine Corps. That puts us at a point where we're competing with comms, we're competing with everything that's under DCI, right? For seats at the table, for funding, and even the way in which things are currently being reorganized at DCI. It kind of puts us in intelligence in a subordinate role to information, but doctrinally, and some of the field grade officers in the MIG agree with me. They even stated so that there is a parity there, but organizationally we've not structured it that way.
I'm trying to choose my words wisely and ensure I don't cross into any realm that's going to go into a classification level.
Right. I understand.
In order to change, you can't just change right off the bat. There has to be, I don't want to say has to be. Usually there's a phased approach. In order to get where you want to, you have to change incrementally.
Right. I guess kind of what I'm getting at is the Durant is still essentially, if we were talking about like from a MEF perspective, the ACS G2 for the Commandant, right?
The way, okay, I see what you're saying. Historically, yes. The way structurally it looks like right now, it's no.
Right.
You have a 3-star that goes to the 4-star, right?
Right. And the 3-star is not an intelligence officer. The 3-star is the deputy commandant for information, and subordinate to her is intelligence.
But isn't intelligence one of the IRCs of information?
But that's a new construct.
Hold on. But it's a new construct, and if the cow is being led to the slaughter, things could change.
But that goes back to my point in which even within the information operations world, we're still saying that intelligence as a warfighting function isn't subordinate to information as a warfighting function. That they're mutually
Is
supporting.
intelligence a domain?
It's a warfighting function.
Okay, intelligence is a war. So what's the difference between a domain and a function?
That's a good question, Master Guns.
Okay,
I don't know the answer to that.
So is information a domain? Is cyber a domain? Is air a domain? Is space a domain? Is sea a domain? Is land a domain?
Yes.
Okay, is intelligence a domain?
Negative.
Okay, so do you fight for information and do you fight with information?
Both.
Correct. That's information operations. Okay, so how do you, part of that information operations is intelligence. one of the functions of information of the domain of information warfare is intelligence.
Okay.
So therefore, if you have a GCE and an ACE and an MLG, and now 2MEF has an ICE, right?
So do all domains need intelligence representation in the same light as information operations?
Does not every domain have an intelligence representation?
Yes.
Isn't there a G2 at the MLG, a G2 at the MAW, G2 at the division?
Exactly. And that's my point, is that the senior intelligence officer of the Marine Corps is now subordinate to the Deputy Commandant for Information. So that means that the Deputy Commandant for Information is going to get intel love in a prioritized fashion
Right.
to the other domains.
So what happens first? Information operations or chambering the first round and clicking off six?
So that goes to the why of my question. Are we saying that information operations supersedes the kinetic meat space?
But there's two aspects of information operations.
There's only two aspects of information operations?
OIE, fighting for information and fighting with information.
Okay.
Okay. Fighting with information is what do you think fighting with information is?
I would say
there's aspects of it, right? Okay.
There's a
I
spectrum
would
of
say
that.
that's intelligence fighting with information. Okay. Fighting for information is to maintain your C2.
Okay.
Okay.
Or digging into the C2 of an adversary, right?
But that would be fighting.
You're fighting for
if you're
that.
digging into the C2, that's fighting with information because you're using the information, the intelligence from the adversary, right? You're taking that information and you're fighting with it.
Okay. I think we did that very well without crossing the line
I think we did too. And
of classification.
This is that PFT aspect of this interview. It's like, dear God, man, I'm getting ready to retire. I still want a job afterward.
Right.
But yeah.
So I say all that with the understanding that I've got orders to DCI staff. And I'm asking these questions not only for the benefit of the audience, but selfishly for my own cognizance, situational awareness. I think that where we fail to fully .mlpf some of our initiatives is going to come back to haunt us. However,
I'm not going to make a comment on that.
However, I'm okay with it just because of the fact that we did have to change, right? And sometimes we'll you make a plan and you execute, and then it doesn't General Mattis
plans are good till the first round goes
right.
downrange, right?
Enemy gets a vote,
Yeah.
and you kind of have to adjust and reassess. But one of the key elements of the criticism of the CPG is the fact that as we start to look to divest ourselves of legacy platforms and things that are no longer going to be relevant in the push for a deeper naval integration, that some of those programs of record that are the leftover pork for certain congressional districts, that he's going to be faced with a significant amount of obstruction, to use the term of the day, as well as some friction points in ways and means and all of that through the House and the rest of Congress. But I'm confident in General Berger's savviness to be able to negotiate those troubled waters. But what I am concerned with is whether or not, we are going to be flexible enough to be able to adapt to that. And it kind of leads me to something I've been working on lately as I'm kind of preparing to pop smoke from Okinawa and head back east is leaving 3MEF with a better unit T-shirt, right? And so when General Nicholson redesigned MEF logo with the Targaryen dragon, right, or Trogdor, depending on who you ask, I sent our redesign to an artist and had him do a more graphic tattoo-like image for a T-shirt. And we did some shisha dogs on the front. And I'm working with a new printer now. Turns out that one of our Marines, Sergeant Eggers, his dad is also a Marine, no longer on active duty. And he has his own silkscreen printing business, and he's looking to get us a better price point for the shirts. And as we're kind of redesigning, I'm going to get rid of the shisha dogs, keep the dragon on the back, and on the front, I'm using the Latin term, or phrase rather, necras, which means not like yesterday. So back when I came in the Marine Corps in '99, then the Warrior Prince. Wait, what was that?
It's a boot.
Boot. Yeah. When I came in the Marine Corps back in '99, then Commandant General Krulak, not Brute, but his son, affectionately termed the Warrior Prince of the Marine Corps by no other than Tom Clancy, was fond of telling the tale of Publius Verus, a Roman proconsul that was famous for initially defeating some of the Germanic tribes that were being a little restless at the edge of empire, something I think we can relate to today. Mm-hmm. And when he was redeployed on a second engagement, was handily defeated by the same Germanic tribes that he had previously overwhelmed with a fair amount of ease, and lost 3 legions and his life in the process. And the last words he was recorded to speak were "Necras, not like yesterday." And it kind of gets after, where we are right now at 3MEF and in the Marine Corps, is that we cannot rest on our laurels. We can't assume that our success in this theater and in other theaters in the past are going to be sufficient in sustained relevance to the American citizenry that depends upon us to execute our mission. And in order to adapt to this environment, we are not going to be able to conduct business as we did yesterday.
Correct. However, we can still accomplish the same mission, and the same, this goes back to Lejeune's message, the same animated spirit, right?
Right.
We need to be found worthy. Right.
But there's some changes that need to be made.
Yep.
So that's that Necras phrase I'm putting on the front of the T-shirt. And I mentioned that in our On the Rock Gang conference working group that we hosted on this past Friday, which was something that I thought was necessary. And having some conversations with a few of our gunnies and staff sergeants, they were hungry for an opportunity to get together in a way in which we do at learning analyses, working groups, OAGs, so on and so forth, at a smaller level, at a local level, and kind of stealing from the On the Roof Gang nomenclature. We dubbed it the On the Rock Gang. We've had our second quarterly meeting. I'm looking to host 2 more before I leave. But giving, and I was talking about this with I believe he's the RO of one of our Marines who was going to be engaged in some potentially heated conversation to provide some perspective and where we need to kind of tighten some things up, and kind of one of the guiding waypoints that I kind of set out there at the onset was, do your best, have fun, be respectful. Mm-hmm. But I was at every point in time that that rounds were being fired around the conference table, I was ready to kind of jump in like Big John McCarthy, like this major's had enough, But then there was a point in time in there where, I was a little bit bothered by something that a lieutenant colonel said, because I thought it was misinformed and lacked some vision. But I let it stand and chose to address it in a different venue because of the delta in terms of rank parity. I didn't want the sergeants in the room to see a master sergeant go full throttle on a lieutenant colonel. It wouldn't. I didn't think that was a play, right? But suffice to say that there's a requirement for us to teach our subordinates how to engage in not necessarily academic, but professional discussion in a way that respects rank and authority and billets and positions, but also empowers them to affect change when and where they can, to do the right thing for the right reasons, particularly when everyone's watching. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I did was I did not enforce a rigid, I have the conch, Lord of the Flies approach to what's that?
You went there.
Yeah. I didn't apply. I have the conch, environment. Being SIG-Inners, I've seen the value in us being able to kind of like have our sidebar conversations, and sometimes it can get carried away. And then of course you bring everybody, back to center mass. But there's some value in sergeant asking the staff sergeant sitting next to him, what did he mean by that? Mm-hmm. Because if you would have asked that directly right then and there, it may derail the train of thought that major was on in his reply to a statement that the master sergeant made. And then he can get that additional information in the moment. Or even better, that staff sergeant looks at that gunny and says, I don't agree with what Master Sergeant said because of this, that, and the other from my billet and my perspective at the wing or at MLG, mm-hmm. whatever the case may be. And the gunny's like, hey, you know what, you're right. And like, hey, Master Sergeant, Staff Sergeant just said something right here, and the Staff Sergeant may not have felt empowered enough to be able to inject that at that point in time, but in his engagement with the gunny realized that no, this needs to be said here and now. Break. We got something over here. Pay attention, and then throw that in for the rest of us to kind of chew and digest on. I'm okay with that, but I could see that there were some non-2600s that were like, wait a minute, we need to have just one conversation here, and I had to kind of like, well, I agree with you. Normally that is the case, but there's a lot of good taking place here, and it's hard to quantify, right? But at the same time, I want these SIG-Inners, particularly out here in Okinawa, to be, prepared to, on order, right, be able to engage, go weapons hot when it's necessary, mm-hmm. and understand when, I think it's probably time to holster my weapon, right?
Continue. I think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
Where do you think I'm going with this?
So this is something I didn't learn as a sergeant and staff sergeant,
right.
And I didn't start understanding it till I was a maybe a senior gunny when I started, because did a lot of joint things.
Yep.
So you tend to be in the Marine Corps by yourself and making sure the Marines under you are still being Marines in the joint environment.
Right. So this goes back to Kyle Cornett's episode when he talks about early to know. This is me providing an open mat, like jiu-jitsu platform for the Marines on Okinawa, the SIG-Inters, to get out of their workspaces in an open environment, in a box, and in civvies, and be able to chew on and discuss collectively as a sub community some of the problem sets that we're currently contending with, and how do we best get after and resolve them? Because a lot of our communication can be hampered or hindered by email or VTC or whatever the case may be, and so getting SIG-Inters into the same room and allowing them to chew on some of the same subjects. And for me, I've kind of teed up as a leveling function certain topics or points of consideration, but not trying to make it be like a TED talk or just being very prescriptive. And I've encouraged a certain amount of interactivity and pausing here and let's put a pin in that, and what do you mean by that, Top, and all of that. I don't want them to feel like it's a one-way conversation. It's definitely I want to encourage and foster an environment where they're open, and we're open for questioning. I don't have all the answers. If that were the case, there would be no reason for me to do this podcast with guests. I'd just be giving it to them directly. But I saw some good in it. But that early to know component is vital, and that was kind of where I was going at. Like how did you learn to engage at that level, and what could we have done, or what do we need to continue to do in order to prevent that with our subordinates? Because in the Rice Bowl fights that are coming up, those individuals or those communities that are incapable of advocating effectively, not just to protect their sub-community, but for the betterment of the warfighting organization as a whole, we've got to teach these Marines how to roll, right? And so these open mat sessions, I think, are a great environment in order to foster an upskill in that area.
So if I remember right, prior to your open kimono, was you sent out an email that said, read these documents.
Yes, I did.
Right. I remember that. And I had already read those documents. I said, this is a good start. I mean, that is a good start. All right. I didn't start getting those until later. And what does this have to do? And I'm going to show some that the message to Garcia, lack thereof, right? It's like, what do these documents have to do with SIGINT? It's nothing to do with SIGINT. No, that's wrong. It's it doesn't say SIGINT. However, what we can do can integrate into that. And if you're the driving force behind it, right, that's, and I'll back up. That's a good start. Get those documents out and have those discussions, right? The other aspect of that is if I would add to it, is those staff sergeants and gunnies, they need to know their officer leadership and what they're trying to accomplish. Okay. They need to understand what their orders are so they can carry out what they need to do and better support that officer.
So that's what I did for them by whipping out the MEF campaign order that's still in draft form. So if you're at the wing, these are your fucking direct tasks from General Clarity to your general, right? And then within there, I think, my efforts are lost if you can't start to identify where you're where that makes that breaks squelch with you, so to speak. Same thing applied, to the MiG, to the G2, so the MU. All of those were broken out in there.
You will make a lot of money by understanding that aspect, and then when you support the officers above you, or right. If you know what they have to accomplish and they're going down a wrong road, you say, hey, sir, how does that apply to this section of the MEF campaign plan or the roadmap to the MIG, right? We signed off. How does this fall into that? They might sit there and look at you and go, maybe I need to readjust. Or it falls in this way. Okay, good to go. As long as we can justify it by the documents we are given, we're heading in the right direction, right? That leads to a lot of really good stuff, second, tertiary effects. That officer know that you have his best interest in play. Okay? If you're taking care of him, he's going to trust future staff NCOs to do the same thing, right? Because we've all been there where some commissioned officer doesn't trust his staff NCOs. And
most definitely.
My first thought is, who screwed this guy over? And I want to go find them right? That's some staff NCO screwed over that officer where he doesn't trust his officer, or he doesn't trust his staff NCOs, and that weakens the organization. That's one of those second and tertiary things of what you're trying to do, and I totally agree with it. You're accomplishing more tasks than you know by doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and the having a conversation with some of my seniors and peers as I'm looking to leave Okinawa better than which I found it. It's not lost on me that this is one of those billets that you can do as much or as little as you'd like, mm-hmm. or as much as you're willing to accept in terms of an outgoing or a change of duty fitness report. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's going to be hard to leave Okinawa in más o menos 6 months because there's so much to do still. I haven't even done half of what I've attempted. Some things I just hit obstacles on and wasn't able to push through to see to fruition. But my conscience is clean and my honor is clean in that I know that I haven't just marked time. Mm-hmm. And I asked Master Gun Sonovan recently, like give me a fair assessment from your vantage, from your observation post out there in K-Bay. Am I doing the right things for the right reasons, and what do I need to be doing? And I got thumbs up from her. And the minute I asked her, like, you're not just saying that, she told me, you know me well enough to know that I don't waste words. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Master Guns, with the observation time that you've had on deck with me, where have you seen me stumble, pick it back up, and continue to roll? Where have you seen me kind of not necessarily excel, but kind of get it right? What could I do better? Just because of the fact that I don't get that feedback enough.
Fair enough, because I think where we're at, our higher up mentors are few and far between, as in distance wise, right?
Right.
I understand what you're saying. Where I think you've gotten it good. Okay, so I'll go back to Semper Fidelis, God, Family, Country, Corps. Seeing how you interact and how you mentor your son, and how you interact and how you support your wife in her endeavors and what you have nominated her for is impeccable at any standard I have ever seen in the Marine Corps. And I'm not blowing smoke in your direction or anything of that nature. It is admirable, and it's good to see that. It's extremely good to see that. Country. You definitely have the country's best interests. The Corps. Can I use a term? You go around the meth and you kiss the ring. You remember, you've come into my office a few times and said, "Hey, Master Guns, I'm here just to kiss your ring. What's going on?" That's good. That's LBWA, leadership by walking around. What's going on in the area? You're trying to, I see you pushing capabilities outside of the Marine Corps to better support MEF operations, whether it be joint or internal to the Marine Corps, right? Can't go any further than that. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Definitely.
Okay. Packaging it might need to be tweaked just a little bit. But I see what you're doing. Okay. Some Marines you got to kick in the butt to move forward, and they do fine. Other Marines you got to pull back. I don't see you having to be kicked anywhere to move forward. I've seen you become overly aggressive on certain things when I've been up in the 2, and I don't know if you knew I was there or not, but I was like, that's, wow. All right. That's good to see. It's good to see.
Yeah, I've been called out more than once for being a little bit too aggressive.
I don't see any problem with that, but that's the Marines, right? That's the Marine Corps.
Well, yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's definitely in character, right? And I didn't realize this until it was the Marines. I was a staff sergeant. The Marines gave me a nickname, El Intenso, that wasn't revealed to me until after they'd been using it for a while. And I guess I didn't see that in myself, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Like, the me I see in the mirror is not the me that Master Guns Deuto sees, that Master Guns Sonovan sees, that Master Guns Ransom or Master Guns Tiffany sees. And then even there's even a distinction or a greater distinction with the Marine that my corporals or lance corporals or sergeants or staff sergeants see. They all see a different side of me, and so like, will the real Sammy Castro please stand up? I mean, it's
that's funny,
right? But that kind of gets after like the Sammy Castro that Liz sees. When I lose my keys, when she hears me using my watch to find my phone, or like the other day, I was rushing out of the door to get to jiu-jitsu, and I got almost halfway there, and I'd forgotten my gi top and my belt. So I drove all the way back because I went early in order to do some stretches, some yoga. I'm working on my flexibility, and but I made the best use of the time as I could by watching and listening to podcasts on the road. But we all get a different perspective of an individual, and that's why getting this type of feedback is so crucial in order for us to be able to seek self-improvement. You have to know yourself, but knowing yourself is a very packaged statement, because the self that you may be familiar with may not be the full picture. So hearing you say that you saw me getting a little froggy doesn't surprise me. I know that's there, but
there's nothing bad with it.
Did I cross the line?
No, I just I'm not gonna say what the subject was about, but it was, you said something, your response to somebody. I've told you 3 times about what I've already done. I'm not going to tell you again. And you just kept going. I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the way. Yeah. I thought it was great.
Okay.
You walked in the back, and I didn't have time to go back there, so I don't know if you saw me or not, but I definitely heard you.
Yeah.
I definitely heard you.
Good to hear, I think. What else?
About anything?
Yeah.
It's I tell you what, I've heard it my entire time I've been in the Marine Corps about the Marines you serve with. If it wasn't for the Marines I served with, I wouldn't be where I am today. And there is so much truth in that. It's I'm going to compare it to history again. There's 16.8 miles of hand-dug tunnels on the island of Iwo Jima, which caused over 5,884 Marines killed or missing in action. Right? You can read that in a book all day long until you experience how much those 16.8 miles of tunnels look like. Not saying I was in every single inch of it, but in some that was pretty impressive and getting hot. Smells just like the books say. They smell, they're hot, they're cold. Got it. There are some Marines that I wish I could have a picture of every single Marine I served with. The leadership challenges, the pains in the butts, the good Marines, there's even a couple that got discharged for doing stupid stuff that they had their strengths. I told you about Timmy Moe. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he'll ever hear this, but Timmy Moe was probably the biggest leadership challenge I think I've ever had in the Marine Corps, but he was the most natural leader I've ever come across. He could make anybody do anything and motivate them to do it for the right reason, sometimes the wrong reason. But he was little sea story here. They lived down on Ford Island, and Timothy Morrison, the harbor tower on Ford Island. We had company PT one morning, and there was a Marine in the brig, and he had a nickname. This Marine in the brig had a nickname named Willie. And he spray painted the sheet Free Willy, and he hung it from the harbor tower. We had company PT that day. None of us saw it. So none of the company leadership saw it, but he could take. I made him I did that whole senior Lance Corporal thing. We had Marines I had a Marine that had a hard time getting up, and I made Tim Morrison wake him up and make sure he's good to go. I was a staff sergeant at the time, and he's a really good Marine. And then I told him one day, he was always, I don't like the Marine Corps. Marine Corps is not what I thought it was. And
I heard that before.
But we were also at Company I. We're at MSB.
So there's some validity to the statement.
There is, right. And I understood it. And I told him one day, I said, hey, you're going to get out of the Marine Corps, because I've seen it before. And you're saying you hate the Marine Corps now, and you're going to get out.
Eat the apple, fuck the Corps.
And you're going to be the guy who says, I was a Marine. I said, but 20 years from now, you're going to be wearing sweatpants and have a whistle around your neck, carrying a clipboard into work, coaching high school football. Mark my words. And he's not coaching high school football. He's actually coaching high school wrestling about 7 miles away from Mount Airy. And I saw him probably about 3 years ago. He played guitar. He still plays guitar at bars for spare money and stuff. He's really good. And he was in the middle of a song, and I happened to there was the bar, and there was like the one chair between everybody. Mm-hmm. And this couple came in, and they look around, and they're trying to find a seat. And I remember, oh man, too bad they don't have a seat. They're looking at the bar and stuff like that. So they turn around and start walking out, and he stops playing. Tim Morrison stops playing. He goes, hey, can you guys scoot over so these guys can come in? They want to hear music just like you guys want to do. and right. So they move up. But that's him. That's Morrison. And that's that natural leadership that he had. And it was, when I saw that, I was like, man, if I could have got that guy to go and just bloom as a leader, the Marine Corps would have been a lot better. But those are the guys. And I say this because I'm coming to an end in a couple of years, about a little over almost 2 years from now. I'm coming to an end. But
looking at your career in the rearview,
I will tell you that the Marines are what I'm going to miss. That the individual Marines and the Marines that I wouldn't be here because of them. Right. I really wouldn't. That's the God honest truth.
So you were the one that really kind of impressed upon me the historical significance of doing this podcast, and I hadn't really considered it in that light until you brought it up. And I mean, of course, like who else to kind of see that but Rich Deuto, right? In that, like these being kind of like autobiographical sketches, or biographical sketches of SIGINT leaders or just Marine staff and CO, or just Marine leaders, because I've had officers on as well, right? And kind of the value of that. And it was kind of something I hadn't really considered previously, and it got me to kind of thinking about that in terms of ensuring that every recording is done appropriately, and that we that kind of like the Hippocratic Oath, that I do no harm. I thought that was very important as well. And when I was looking back at some of the things that might stand out as examples of other initiatives in the same vein or train of thought, was Dunk's Almanac, and Green Side Out, Brown Side Out, and Facts and Fiction.
Everyone scream and shout.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of that. And I've been on the hunt for H.G. Duncan's writings for a little bit now. And the last time I remember seeing it was at the Marine Corps Association bookstore there at Camp Lejeune, right across from the field there, not too far from the traffic circle. And when I recently called Marine Corps Association and Foundation to determine if they had any, stock or inventory just kind of hanging around, it's out of print. And what I've been able to find out is when he died, he was a former Russian linguist, which was not known to me until a retired airman, loaned me his father's book. His father was a Marine. Loaned me his father's book up until I PCS. I had to give it back to him. But when he died, his family turned over the publishing rights to the Marine Corps Association and Foundation. So I asked him, do you have any copies laying around? The answer to that is no, they don't.
That's a shame.
And so my next question, right, because I'm somewhat aggressive, was like, okay, so when are you going to publish some more? We're not. Okay, so do you have a soft copy available that I could purchase from you, or is there an EPUB or a PDF? Somebody scan this. I was using the Gutenberg Project and other resources to get my hands on it. The only way I've been able to find it is used copies for like $100 each.
It's really that's funny. Are you looking for one?
Well, yeah.
All right.
I'm looking for I want a full set.
Okay.
And I want it to be scanned or made available to the community. It's part of our history.
It is.
And if the Marine Corps Association and Foundation, a nonprofit, as I understand, who's tasked and responsible for enshrining that stuff on our behalf, right? I understand to a certain extent it's a business, but if they've got it, if they have the rights to it, make it available to the Marines who need to be able to laugh at ourselves in the way in which Dunk was able to make us do. because it's our previous generation's version of Terminal Lance.
It is. Yeah.
And
never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's exactly right. It is exactly right.
And so, so there's the ask, Master Guns. If in your travels, if you happen to come across
Master Sergeant, seems like you gave me some marching orders, and you're asking me to use my connections to get the Marine Corps words out, our folklore and legend. Taken.
Yeah,
right,
I think there's some value in that, and, especially from the SIGINT community, because him being a ruling, I think it would be great for them to be able to have a copy. And I wanted, I've been wanting to include like anecdotes where appropriate for certain guests to kind of throw out there for discussion and provoke some thought and conversation. I thought that would be a great piece to kind of break in as a recurring segment. Mm-hmm. But I kind of want to stick the landing on this.
Okay.
And kind of circle back to the pressure to be like Dad. Mm-hmm. And what was that something you had to contend with, to live up to not only his expectations but his reputation, and how you manage that, whether it be managed effectively or ineffectively, and how that informed the manner in which you approached your son's entrance into the Marine Corps. So normally I've asked Marines in the past, what would you tell Sergeant Deuto? In this case, being a younger version of yourself. But if you had to convey to your son right now, like the things that he's doing right, or the things that you would like to express to him in a way in which I think any father would want their son to hear, if they were of the same tribe in the way in which you and your son are. What would you say?
Okay, so from top down, then middle to bottom. So from dad to me to my son. Okay, so my father was he never did force the Marine Corps on me. The one thing I got from my father was loyalty. If you're going to do this, you're loyal to the Marine Corps. Treat the Marine Corps good. The Marine Corps will treat you good. He also told me, he says, if you're going to join, go back to the kind of the band comment. He said, if you're going to join the Marine Corps, you need to be, if you're going to go enlisted, you go ground, 03. He says, if you go officer, you go be a pilot. I didn't listen to him on that aspect. There's a lot of truth in that statement. Loyalty, you have to be loyal to your family. You have to definitely be loyal to your country. And you definitely have to be loyal to the Marine Corps. If you're in it for yourself, then you're not going to go very far. Anyone I've ever seen that was in it for themselves, if they did make it far, they didn't go. If they did make it up, they didn't go very much further. My son, I will tell him the same thing, is the only thing I would add, definitely loyalty. I would also tell him, treat your body now as a professional athlete, because as it gets older, it's going to remember every late night and early PT session, right?
Right.
Treat your body like a professional athlete. I think all this HIT stuff that's going on in the Marine Corps now, the HIT and that's a good thing. What else would I tell my son? He keeps in contact with me. He asks me advice. I will tell him advice, whether he follows it or not. He's his own man. He can make that decision. I wish he would get a haircut. He needs to get a haircut. he's out on MSG duty, the whole anti-terrorism thing, right?
Yeah.
He still needs to get a haircut. He knows better. He had a hired when he was at ROTC. He had a better high and tight than he does now. So anyway, now, yeah, my father. He's told me some really good things. He's given me some advice. Some I took, some I should have took, some I didn't take. But he's pretty much done the same thing I've done with my son. You're your own man. Make your own decisions.
And with that, we're out.